you certainly want to draft players from the best offenses in the NFL, right? Last year, if you look at the top 10 offenses, well, how about this? Each of the top 4 quarterbacks in fantasy were on top 7 offenses, and 6 of the top 7 were on top 7 offenses. 4 of the top running back is not as strong of a correlation. 4 of the top 10, 6 of the top 12 running backs were on top 10 offenses. Each of the top 5 wide receivers last year in just full points, not per game, just overall points, PPR. Each of the top 5 were on top 7 offenses, and tight ends kind of like running back. Only one of the top 5 tight ends was on a top 10 offense. That was Sam Laporta. Remember, the Chiefs were a little disappointing last year. They were not a top 10 offense. Anyway, welcome to the show. We're going to talk about our favorite offenses for 2024. Heath will give us some projections. Also, highest volume offenses, teams that are going to run the most plays. Could be a really big deal as we look at this stuff. When you guys draft, Heath, when you draft, how much does the quality of the offense, which of course is not always the easiest thing to predict, but how much does the quality of the offense matter to you?
I think probably the lack of quality of the offense matters to me more. I'm not generally thinking, is this a top 10 offense? Do I really want to draft this guy in round 3 from this offense? But I am often thinking, oh, they're going to stink. I don't want to have somebody on the, I don't know, just some random NFC East offense. But it's that's the way I'd say. It worries me more to be a part of a terrible offense than I would like. I'm not going to exclude somebody because I think they're going to be on the 15th best offense.
It's even worse when it's a terrible offense or a mediocre offense that has a terrible defense or a mediocre defense. That to me, that's part of the formula. And then there's some people that say, well, what if they've got a great defense? And that might mean lower scoring games. It all works the same. If your offense can't put up points, it's real simple. If your offense puts up points, you want players who might have a chance at getting those points. And if they are with a team that's got a bad defense, then man, there could be a lot of, scoreboard blowout type games that might be happening in Arizona this year, for example.
Arizona.
Yeah. I don't think their defense is that good,
but their offense is not bad at all.
I agree.
I think they might just be a lot of shootouts.
I kind of changed where I was driving on that comment there, Heath.
Oh, okay.
And made a hard right turn toward good offense, bad defense. That's kind of the combination that really hits it for me.
I think this sort of comes into play for me with mid-round wide receivers, which we're about to have another show on that, by the way. But I talk about this a lot. There's definitely more of a correlation between wide receivers, good offenses, and good wide receiver production, more so than running backs. You don't have to be on a good offense to be a great running back. You don't have to be on a good offense to be a great wide receiver, but it certainly seems to help more. I just told you about the top 4 quarterbacks and the top 7 wide receivers or whatever it was, top 5 wide receivers, all on top 7 offenses. So, if you're looking in the middle rounds and you're thinking about looking at 2 guys back to back in average draft position, this is a tough one, but Malik Neighbors versus Stephon Diggs, it's probably not that tough for you guys, but Diggs is in a unique situation where he's one of 3. We don't usually see that, but God, the Texans should score so many more points than the Giants.
That's why, like, when you were having that conversation about it mattering more to you about mid-round wide receivers, I was like, my follow-up, not a troll, was, well, why do you keep drafting so much Malik Neighbors?
Yeah. No, I don't. Well, first of all, I don't. Honestly, I haven't drafted him once since like the very beginning, other than the Dynasty League, because I think he might be starting to go a little bit too high for me. I like to take him after that run of kind of reliable, if you can call George Pickens that, Diggs, Pickens, Zay Flowers, Amari Cooper, T. Higgins. I'm looking at ADP now. They'd all go ahead. Once I saw Deontay Johnson go ahead of Malik Neighbors, I was like, no, that's a mistake. I still think I'd take Malik Neighbors over Jordan Addison. I'd take him over. I don't really think like I'm that much higher on him than you guys are. I think ADP is actually, but yeah, that's hopefully he can transcend.
I agree with T. Martin in the chat. Neighbors is a great wide receiver 4.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that at all. I think
if you can get him as a wide receiver 4, that's awesome.
Great wide receiver 3 and a risky wide receiver 2.
Risky, but good. He's got potential to be a wide receiver 2.
I guess if you think that, because we have talked about how there's like 30 wide receiver 2s. And if that's the case, then Neighbors would be a great wide receiver 3. But like by definition, a great wide receiver 3 would be somewhere in that 26 to 29 range.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly realistic for him. Where do you have Neighbors?
41.
And Dave?
41 among receivers or 41 overall?
Among receivers, right?
I've got him 31 among all receivers.
All right,
I'm excited about him because I think he might be on a bad offense on a team with a maybe improving defense. So that's not a great formula, but I do think that they changed their calculus and they just force feed him targets. So they might not do a lot of scoring, but I think Neighbors could be the leader there by a wide margin.
Yeah, if I just look at NFC average draft position, 100 drafts from May 1st to July 1st, Malik Neighbors is wide receiver 24. Best ball certainly factors in because I know he's going to be higher in best ball. But he's going ahead of Zay Flowers, Amari Cooper, George Pickens, Tank Dell, T. Higgins. And as the guy who's probably the highest on Malik Neighbors, I think that's too high. But I think Keenan Allen, Christian Kirk probably ahead of Neighbors in PPR. Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Jaden Reed. I would take Neighbors over all those guys. Not Heath.
I think I'm with you on all those names.
What about Christian Kirk, Dave?
Oh, I've got Kirk over Neighbors.
Yeah.
Full PPR.
Well, if you like what you're hearing, why don't you go ahead and vote for us? We are a nominee for the Best Sports Podcast category in the People's Choice Podcast Awards. I voted yesterday. I voted while we were on the air. Dan or Dave was talking. I wasn't even listening. I was just voting, and it only took about 40 seconds to do. You sign up. It's super easy. You go to podcastawards.com. If you want, you can go to podcastawards.com/app/sign up. But you can get there from podcastawards.com. Toggle down to the sports category. And again, the whole process takes less than 60 seconds. You can nominate us actually for People's Choice and for the sports category. And there is a link in the episode description. And yeah, I was going to give, should I give this stat about DeVonta Smith? What do you guys think? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Oh,
No.
right. I heard Heath first. This is a stat that I'm going to get. It's just to get you excited about our next episode, which will publish on Friday. We're recording it. If you want to watch it earlier, you can watch it on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. We're recording this one pretty much as soon as this episode ends. We'll record our next one. It's about mid-round wide receivers. Over the last 2 seasons, DeVonta Smith has played 25 regular season games with both A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert. In those 25 regular season games, he has averaged 13.6 PPR fantasy points per game. That would have made him wide receiver 24 per game in 2023. If you want to unfairly maybe take away the 2 games he played with Gardner Minshew and just look at the 23 games with Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Dallas Goedert, that drops to 12.5 PPR fantasy points per game for DeVonta Smith. That's wide receiver 36 per game last year. In 8 games over the last 2 regular seasons that Smith has played without Dallas Goedert, he has averaged 17.9 PPR fantasy points per game. That would have made him wide receiver 6 last season. So we don't have to get into this now. That's a little bit of a tease of what's coming up on our Friday episode. But DeVonta Smith is really good when he gets targeted. But he doesn't get targeted that much when A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert are on the field.
How many receivers can you name that are really bad when they get targeted?
I mean, I think he's better than most.
Sure. But typically receivers that get a lot of targets can put up at least modest fantasy totals. Not that 17 is modest. 17 is really good.
Heath, can you think of anyone that doesn't do well with a lot of targets?
Well, I mean, when you say really bad when targeted, the guy that I think of is who is great at drawing targets, but bad at turning those into fantasy points so far in his career.
I would say Garrett Wilson.
Okay, that's one. Deontay Johnson.
Yeah.
Isn't
this really a touchdown conversation?
Could be.
Guys who get a lot of targets but don't score a lot. Garrett Wilson had 3 touchdowns last year. Who else were you thinking? You were thinking Deontay?
I would say, and I'm a bigger fan of him than everybody else on the show, but the way he gets talked about, Michael Pittman.
Yeah, that was who I was also going to say. Not a lot of touchdowns. Yeah.
Jerry Jeudy.
He's such a mixed bag. I have no idea really what to say about Jerry Jeudy at all.
All right, let's take a break here and come back and talk about
during your drafts, and you'll do okay.
Yeah, we got one news item, and then we'll get into the best offenses in the NFL, what we project for 2024. We'll be right back.
There are some things in life that you can't quite explain.
An extraordinary story.
Maybe it sounds flawless, looks effortless, or makes you feel like a part of history.
The first ever goal for BFC.
And when all of those phenomenons come together, it's perfect. Pitch perfect.
Injury, new and note. Only one item today. Adam Grossbard of the OC Register. Thank you for the laugh, Dave. He talked to Roto World, and he said that Sean McVay loves Kyren Williams, and they drafted Blake Corum to give Williams a breather. They drafted him because he reminds them of Blake Corum, of Kyren Williams.
Sure.
And he can fill in and be Kyren Williams, basically, if Kyren got hurt. But if you heard what Adam Grossbard said, you wouldn't be too concerned about Kyren Williams' role. Was that how you interpreted it, Dave?
Yeah, I think so. And that's nice to hear because Kyren Williams is going to go with an early round pick, and people are counting on him repeating what he did last year. I'd be nervous to say that he can repeat the total touchdowns. It was 15 in 12 games. I think that number comes down, and I think he'll miss some time. I definitely enjoy the idea of if you fall into Kyren Williams in round 2, get Blake Corum, lock up that backfield.
And he is currently hurt.
Yeah. Is he not okay
yeah,
now?
but I think he's expected for training camp.
But he's someone who's had trouble staying healthy in the past who is not currently healthy.
It's 3 years. This is his 3rd year in the NFL coming up, and he's had 4 lower body injuries.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I know the injuries are right. I'm pretty sure this is year 3 for Kyren Williams.
It is year 3.
Yes.
And that is your injury new and note for today. All right, best offenses. So Heath gave his top 5 offense in terms of his projected touchdowns. Not, I guess, doesn't care about field goals. And Dave gave his top 10 favorite offenses for the season.
Yeah.
And your highest projected in terms of most touchdowns. Can I say these are your highest scoring offenses?
Yeah.
All right. Miami 1. They were 2nd last year. San Francisco 2. They were 3rd last year. This one, I mean, this is the one that really stands out. The Chargers 3rd. They were 21st last year. Kansas City 4th. They were only 15th last year. And the Cowboys 5th. And they were number 1. They led the NFL in points per game last season. So Heath goes Dolphins, 49ers, Chargers, Chiefs, and Cowboys. 2 teams that struggled to score last year. You have them in your top 5, the Chargers at 3 and the Chiefs at 4.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the Chiefs were middle of the pack. I'm not sure that was struggling to score last year, but sure, that one probably doesn't surprise anyone. The Chargers kind of surprised me a little bit. And that's the point that I'd like to make early in this discussion. Jacob Gibbs changed my mind a little bit earlier this week on Caleb Williams, and I bumped him up just a little bit. There are things that happen during these discussions, and I'm like, do I need to make a little adjustment there? And this was one that made me think that. But at the same time, we all think Justin Herbert's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the NFL. We all think Greg Roman is one of the best run game designers in the NFL. I think they're going to chop this running game up too much to where none of the guys are like top 20 or top 15 running backs. But I do expect them to be amongst the league leaders in rushing touchdowns. And I have a hard time projecting Justin Herbert for fewer than 25 passing touchdowns. So that does lead to a high touchdown projection for them.
It's very interesting. First of all, sorry, Dave, I just want to say before I forget, I don't know that Jacob Gibbs could be crushing the newsletter any more than he is. So please get the Fantasy Football Today newsletter in your inbox, cbssports.com/newsletters. But yeah, Dave, what do you make of this? The Chargers, well, really, Heath's saying that they're going to be among the leaders in rushing touchdowns and projecting them for the 3rd most touchdowns in the NFL.
I think it comes down to Heath buying into what they're selling as far as the run game goes, because you think about 25 passing touchdowns for Justin Herbert, and that shouldn't get you that excited. But the offensive line is expected to not only be better because of the talent that they added in the draft, but also just because of how they're schemed and coached up. That's kind of been a hallmark for both Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, to have that offensive line as a huge strength. And that works both ways. Not only does that work in the run game, but also protecting the quarterback. That makes the path to 25 touchdowns low bar for Justin Herbert. It makes it easier to kind of view and figure out. It's more about, do they really have the talent at running back to score? How many touchdowns do you have the running game going for, Heath?
Over 20. I think the most in the NFL. And like, how many Gus Edwards score last year? I've got him at 25.
13, right? He had like a record. It was a career high for him.
25. Wow.
I've got 4 for Herbert.
Oh,
10 for Edwards.
okay.
And 10 for the other guys.
Yeah, I think the 10 for the other guys seems a little steep. I think 4 for Herbert seems a little steep. Just a little steep. I would probably say that number should be in like the 17 range combined for all their running backs and Herbert. So 17 plus 40, 25, that's 42. And that's not bad. Is it top 10 for touchdowns?
No.
Maybe. No? Maybe
not in mine. Yeah, 46 I think was the cutoff.
That's the mark to make. Okay, so they'd be just short. And I think if you would come on the show today and said the Chargers are going to be just shy of being a top 10 offense, but maybe middle of the pack, I think everybody would believe you. I think that buy-in would be a lot easier. I don't see them as a top 10 offense for fantasy.
Well, and that's the difference. Like, I think because of the way this offense is going to function, I wouldn't call them a top 10 offense for fantasy. I think they could, and that makes the discussion interesting. I think they're going to score touchdowns, but they're going to chop up the running back touches, probably 40%, 35%, 10%. And then we don't have any idea who the number 1 wide receiver is at this point. And we don't think they're going to let Justin Herbert throw enough to throw for 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns.
Right.
Yeah. So question then, did you, when you saw your projections and the Chargers were 3rd highest scoring team, did you move McConkey? I mean, who really boosted? Because obviously you're not really too excited about any individual running back. You've made that clear. They're going to chop it up so much. But did you move Herbert up? Did you move any of the receivers up?
Well, no. The numbers I'm giving you today are a compilation of the total player numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So like the team numbers do not exist separate from the player projections.
So who would stand out then? Does anyone stand out on this offense? Does anyone have a big season?
I think I'm higher on Ladd McConkey than most. Like, but I would rather draft Ladd McConkey than Malik Neighbors in redraft. I think Josh Palmer's probably too overlooked. The really, really interesting question is, what does this team do at tight end? Because that's been the thing in the Greg Roman passing game. Like, we know it with Mark Andrews. We saw it a little bit before that. What happens with, like, what do they have? Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. I've got that pretty much chopped up as well. Yeah. But I do have those guys like seeing 110 targets. If one of them becomes the true tight end 1, then maybe that's the place where we have a standout.
I almost wonder if it's Hurst who's going to catch more passes over the course of the season than Dissly, because Disley's known just as much for blocking, probably more for blocking than he is for receiving. He's just a sneaky good receiver. He hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities, certainly compared to Hurst, but Hurst has been such a letdown over the course of his career. I can't imagine investing much in either of those tight ends unless it's tight end premium. And I'd be surprised if they combined for more than 6 touchdowns over the course of the season. Also,
tomorrow is Independence Day, not Halloween. There's this very spirited discussion in the chat about who I will be going for. Apparently today I look like people who I will be going. Halloween is we're months away from that. I'm trying to figure out my what I'm going to grill tomorrow right now.
Yeah, I and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to bake tomorrow. But I like. Do you really? Okay. I'm gonna be that guy. Really, the Chargers? Like, do you think maybe you need to lower your projections because they're not really going to be the third highest?
Yeah, I might. That's what I was saying at the beginning of the show. That's on my list of things. This weekend, I'm going to Kansas City for a live Scott Fishbowl draft, and I'm going to have a little bit of time in the hotel with nothing else to do. So projections update will be happening, and that's one of the things on my list to say, maybe. But at the same time, I have Justin Herbert at QB 15 or something. I don't have a Chargers running back in the top 30. I don't have a Chargers wide receiver in the top 30. Like, what real impact is it going to make?
Right.
That makes me think that you just have numbers that are a little inflated. I bet you'll look at those backup running backs and you'll say, okay, I'm probably a little too high on those touchdowns.
So I want to talk about the Cowboys here, they're coming in at 5th in your projections, Heath, and they were 1st last year. Dave, you didn't even put them in your top 10 and probably 11. You'd have them as a dark horse. But isn't it kind of weird? You look at the Cowboys and what do they have? 2 good players? Ferguson's good, but like 2 real true difference makers on offense, and they led the NFL in scoring last year. And are they going to take a step back? Should we be factoring that in as we think about Lamb and Prescott? Obviously, 5th there's nothing to sneeze at there with 5th. But Dave, you seem a little bit lower than that on the Cowboys offense.
I worry a little bit about it, but not enough to downgrade where I have Lamb. We've already talked about Lamb. Lamb was one of the players I'm nervous about being wrong about. And Dak is such a value on draft day. And to me, it comes down to that track record that Dak Prescott's had over the last few seasons, that when he's right and when he's doing okay, his numbers are great. We're talking like 24 plus PPR points per game. I don't know why I said PPR there. I'm kind of a weirdo. But even like last year, he was on fire after the bye. I think that was closer to like 30 fantasy points per game for Dak Prescott. And I wonder if this defense takes a step back this year. Losing Dan Quinn, losing a couple of players, I'm real concerned about that defensive front, mainly the tackles, not so much Michael Parsons because he's awesome, but the big guys up front. Could that be part of what lets down this unit? Do they take a step back? Maybe that forces Dallas to throw more. Maybe that's good for Dak and Lamb, and I think the opportunities for those two will be great. Ferguson as well. But I bet they don't score as many points as they did last year. And if anything goes wrong, if that offensive line blows up, if someone gets hurt, this is an offense that could really be a fantasy letdown. I didn't have them in my top 10. I don't think they're quite there.
I think the one thing you said wrong there, Adam, was you said they have 2 good players. We don't care for fantasy purposes about their offensive line, but they have a very good offensive line, which does contribute to scoring points.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Which is what the Chargers are trying to emulate themselves, if not improve on.
So here are some teams that are in Dave's top 5 that are not in Heath's.
I didn't rank them.
Oh, okay.
I just
fantastic. Give us your top 5, Dave.
Well, yeah. You want to give us your top 5?
Sure. I think the Niners are up there. I think the Eagles are up there. I think the Dolphins are up there. I think if the Bengals are right, I think they'll be up there too. And I think the Chiefs are going to go back to being top 5.
Okay, so that would be the Bengals and the Eagles.
Again, that's not in a top 5 order. It's just the 5 names that I read off.
Bengals and Eagles, you mentioned, they are not in Heath's top 5. For all I know, they could be 6 and 7. Also, Houston is a team that's not in Heath's top 5 that Dave seems pretty high on. Baltimore,
right, but not top 5.
Like Heath, do you disagree in terms of top 10 for any of those teams? Houston, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Buffalo. I'll throw those 5 names out. Do you think they're all going to be top 10 offenses? Houston, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Buffalo.
I think that Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Houston were all just outside of my top 5. The one that's interesting, because I'll just go in a little bit to what Gibbs and I were talking about, was Vegas projections. And he was talking about quarterback projected touchdown passes and where they've set the line. And so I went and looked at my quarterback projections and like how I have them versus what the over-under is for quarterback touchdown passes this year. And the guy I was highest on was Joe Burrow.
Mm.
His number's only like 27. And I think that's probably showing a little bit of fear about Joe Burrow's health.
Yeah. That's exactly.
If you're going to tell me that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are all going to play 17 games, then yeah, they're probably right there at the 3, 4, 5, 6 range. I wouldn't disagree with that. It's just really hard after what we've seen the last 3 years, especially with Burrow and Higgins, to believe they're going to play 17 games fully healthy. So I think health concerns would be the thing that would keep Cincinnati out of there. I've got Buffalo 7th or 8th, but I am like the way Dave was talking about Dallas is kind of how I feel about the Bills.
Yeah.
Like that thing could just go real. There's even with Joe Brady, who like I've talked about him in a positive way because of James Cook. I'm not sure that's going to work out great. In terms of their offensive philosophy, they don't have a wide receiver. And Dalton Kincaid, like we were asking, who's a guy who doesn't do very well when he's targeted? Dalton Kincaid had more targets last season than George Kittle in the same number of games.
And he had fewer fantasy points.
And he had like 75% as many fantasy points.
Right.
It wasn't even close. So I'm not sure they have anybody that's particularly good after the catch there in Buffalo, except for James Cook.
Sure.
And the name on Dave's top 10, the one I would probably have the lowest, I think, is the Rams.
Okay. Yeah, they were a top 10 offense last year, which may have surprised some people, obviously with Puka Nacua being that good. But,
Kyren Williams being that good.
What's not to like about the Rams? Just too old and brittle?
I think that's mostly it. And like how much of, I don't actually think that Kyren Williams is a top 10 running back in the NFL. I think he scored a bunch of touchdowns and got all of the touches, but Kupp's too old. Stafford's too old,
Yeah.
Things can go wrong there too.
Does anybody have fears?
We can say that with almost every offense, right?
Does anybody have fears about the Eagles after the way they finished?
Well, I think what happened in Philadelphia was that Jalen Hurts was playing with an injury that he was affecting his game. And I think the defense put the offense in really terrible positions. And so if those two things are fixed this year, plus you're adding Saquon Barkley into the mix, I'm willing to buy back into Philadelphia being a really good offense.
I am not concerned about their end of season. I think that whole thing fell apart, and I think coaching and injuries explains most of it.
There it is.
I think they're in that 6 through 10 range.
I talked with an Eagles player off the record about it, and he seemed to insist that it was a communications issue.
Okay. There should not be any concerns really about the Lions offense, I assume, whether they're 5th or 3rd or 7th or whatever.
Another exciting offense with a very good offensive line. You can kind of see the thread between a lot of these offenses and why they might be top 10. Strong offensive line. That's great for Jared Goff. Possible improvement in explosive play rate with Jameson Williams finally getting it. They want to give Jahmyr Gibbs the ball more. That makes all the sense in the world. Great targets in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. There's a lot that defenses are going to have to contend with for Detroit. And they don't
have to go outside.
And they don't. It's 2 games outdoors all year, Heath?
2 or 3, yeah.
They don't have to go outside. That's the Adam Azer way. I love it. I'm all about the.
I mean, listen, they do have some games in domes with retractable roofs, so I guess they're not domes like Arizona in week 3. But who really cares? It's basically good surfaces and good environments that help Detroit. I used to really care a lot about that. In this instance, I care a little bit just because the Lions have just so many games where weather won't be a factor. That helps a lot. But to me, it's more about the offensive line and the weapons they have.
All right, I'm going to give you guys some names. How surprised would you be if these teams finished with a top 5 offense? The Houston Texans.
Not surprised.
5.
Really?
On a scale of 1 to 5?
1 to 10, right? Is it 1 to 5? 3.
Oh, no, on a 1 to 10 scale is fine. Or
Yeah,
is
5.
0 to 10 scale even. All right, that's higher than I would have thought. I mean,
Yeah, like 3. I wouldn't be that surprised.
All right. The Colts.
6. For top 5, I'd be a little surprised.
Slightly more surprised than the Texans. So yeah, 6.
Browns.
I'm going to say 6 again. But
6.
that's an offense that could be pretty good. They say Deshaun Watson's right and that he's pretty much all set for camp.
I'm reading from Dave's dark horse list, by the way. And this scale, in case you missed it, is how surprised these guys would be if they finished as a top 5 offense.
With
So
10 being like shocked and 0 being not at all shocked.
The Jets.
That's going to be
8.
higher than 6 for me. Yep. I was going to say 7.
I would say 4. I mean, you've got an elite running back and an elite wide receiver, and you've got Aaron Rodgers, who obviously big range of outcomes there, but he doesn't need much. You know? Yeah.
He doesn't need much. And I wonder, even like in the best case scenario, they might be 9th or 10th in total points.
Arizona.
3.
5.
Atlanta.
I think I'd be a little shocked if they were top 10. I'm going to give them a 7 as well.
Top 5.
Oh, top 5, I mean. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, let's go higher because I'm thinking top 10 like an idiot. 9.
Like an idiot. The Packers.
Top 5, I'd be surprised. 8.
9.
I'd be more surprised if the Falcons were top 5 than the Packers.
So far, the Packers would surprise me the most.
I would be 0 surprised if the Packers finished top 5. I see that potential for them.
So you really just feel like you have no idea who the top 5 offenses are going to be?
No, there are definitely teams that would be like a -5 on this scale. My top 5 would be the 49ers, in some order. 49ers, Dolphins, Lions, Eagles, probably Chiefs, but I would say Ravens definitely belong in there.
There's just so many, we talked about the top 10. There are so many exceptionally good offenses in that group that it's hard for me to imagine these teams being better than 5 of them.
So I wasn't
Who were the
really
top 10 last year? Do you have the top 10?
Yeah, I do. I wasn't really.
I would imagine that half of the top 10 from last year will not be top 10 this year. We should probably rate which ones those will be.
Okay, but there's a big difference between the top 5 and the top 10, really. But I was thinking more could they just have an amazing offensive season? I wasn't necessarily thinking about could they beat out this team, but just play like a top 5 offense. But fair enough. Top 10 last year was Dallas, Miami, San Francisco, Baltimore, Detroit, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Rams, Saints, Colts.
The
Saints were top 10 in what measure?
In points.
Offensive points?
Total points. I don't know.
Okay.
They couldn't have. I mean, they couldn't have been that far away from
points,
being just offensive points. They had 6 more points. Oh, and actually, the Colts and Browns were tied for 10th. But yes, that doesn't factor in special teams and defensive touchdowns. I don't know how many of those existed. But that's the thing about the Saints, and I made this point about Olave, is they could score more points this year. They're probably not going to score that many more points. They weren't that bad of an offense last year. But Dave, you can look up where they finished as a team. All right, we're going to take a break. By the way, I had a comment in here that was absolutely right about me. See if I can find it. It said Adam bakes s'mores. Yeah. That is true. I did bake. I did it a few weeks ago. We baked s'mores.
I've got your top 5 in offensive touchdowns
from last year. Not offensive touchdowns. I'm about offensive points.
We don't care about field goals.
Yeah, but we still want to know who's scoring the most points.
No, we want to know who's scoring the most touchdowns.
You know what? I kickers are people too. All right, we're go ahead, Dave. Who had the most
in the top 10?
Hey, there you go. About
for
that.
Offensive touchdowns.
All right, let's take a break. And we'll talk about volume in our next segment. We'll be right back.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
It's just really, I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to be the first person to talk after the break. I apologize, Adam. They were a top 10 in offensive touchdowns and did not have one player with more than 5 rushing touchdowns and did not have more than one player with 5 receiving touchdowns.
Guess what? They were top 10 in offensive points scored per game, too.
This is the Saints we're talking about. It was a bad year for offense. It really was. How much
we're chalking this up.
How much separated them from, let's say, the Eagles or whatever, who were 7th, I think?
Saints were at 22.4 offensive points per game. Philadelphia was at 24.1. The leader was the 49ers at 28.4. So 6 points per game. Niners were just, almost better than everybody else in the league. There were 3 teams around 27 points per game.
Okay, last question. Saints were at about 22 points per game. They were, 9th or 10th in scoring?
Ninth in offensive points scored per game.
What did the 15th and the 16th best teams score?
15th was Houston. They were at 20.9. 16th was Cincinnati at 20.7. Guess who was the worst? I bet you can guess who was the worst. You get one.
Giants.
You're
Giants.
Both way off. And Heath guessed.
Panthers.
Panthers, 12.6.
All right, highest volume offenses. We want more plays. And Heath, you have projected as the most plays in the NFL, the Eagles, the Browns. They were first last year, by the way.
They were.
The Cowboys, the Bills, they were 23rd in 2022, but 5th last year. And the Lions. So again, the Eagles, Browns, Cowboys, Bills, and Lions are the teams that you have projected to run the most plays in the NFL.
Yeah, and the Eagles have been, like most of these teams, I look at that, the Eagles have been top 7 each of the last 2 years, and Kellen Moore is always towards the top of the list, whether he was with the Cowboys or the Chargers, partially because when you only go 4 yards at a time and you just keep getting first downs, you get to run a lot of offensive plays. I think the Browns were top 7 each of the last 2 years. The Cowboys were top 8 each of the last 2 years, and the Bills and Lions were both top 5 last year.
Yeah. Did you see any adjustments for new coordinators or anything like that showed up in your projections? Well,
the Kellen Moore bump for the Eagles. The one that I haven't, and I don't, maybe you guys can help me with this one. The Browns do technically have a new offensive coordinator. I mostly just look at everything Browns as Kevin Stefanski's.
Right.
I don't really, and if that could change because the offensive coordinator changed, I'm just not factoring it in. The Bills ran more plays last year after they switched coordinators. So that one feels pretty good. The Lions have had the same coordinator. The Cowboys have the same coordinator they had last year.
Yeah. And by the way, the Bills got rid of Ken Dorsey, started running more plays. Ken Dorsey is now the offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns.
A couple of interesting ones, though. Seattle and Chicago. I saw Gibbs was tweeting about how we've seen in, what's his name now? The Bears offensive coordinator. What was that? Yeah, Waldron has been faster in terms of pace, but their play total in terms of offense has been awful.
Oh, yeah. Dead last in 2 of his 3 seasons.
Right. Because presumably they couldn't get off the field on defense. On the flip side,
I don't know about that. I
then
think
what would be the explanation for having a very fast pace but not running very many plays?
I think they were bad on third down at least one of those years, like really bad on third down. I could look into that. But the Seahawks haven't had like a dismal defense, have they?
Mediocre. Maybe they couldn't get off the field on third down. Anyway, just an interesting to watch in Chicago because I kind of had Chicago, especially with a rookie quarterback, projected as a slower offense. Gibbs had them as a faster offense, and that will make a difference in how you view Caleb Williams. And then they've got a new offensive coordinator in Seattle that a lot of people are excited about doing some new stuff. My research has mostly shown that first-year play callers in the NFL are not very fast for the most part.
And that's Seattle.
Right.
That's true.
Okay.
But I would guess that Seattle will try and, I mean, that is what Ryan Grubb is about, is tacking on the plays and playing with tempo. And he likes to throw the ball too. I think it's a good situation for the passing offense for the Seahawks.
It's such an interesting thing because, like, Mike McDonald, you generally think, what does a defensive coach say? Like, let's not make the defense go right back out on the field. That will be those two. I think Chicago and Seattle, you should express very little certainty in either direction.
Okay. I'm just trying to see the third down rate for Seattle over the last 3 years. It was always
Last year was 36%, bottom 10.
Yeah, where does it rank? They always ranked around 20th, 23rd, so not good, but not terrible. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is there, why they ran so few plays. I'm surprised. Put it this way, based on what I knew about them, having run so few plays each of the last 3 seasons, I think they were 32nd, 22nd, and 32nd in plays run, the Seattle Seahawks, which is a big deal. I figured I'm surprised that they were fast-paced.
Another thing that can, like, we've seen the Chiefs in, I think it was the 2018 season, had a fairly low play total, but it was because they scored from the 50 so often. Seattle has had an offense in the past, not every year, that has made some big plays. And that will, like, if you're hyper efficient, that can cut into your play total, but in a good way. We're fine with that.
I would imagine you're not going to have a lot of bad offenses running a lot of plays. Is that accurate?
Well, were the Chargers a bad offense last year?
I think they were between 15 and 20 in scoring, something like that.
So not truly bad. I would agree with that.
Right. I mean, the Browns certainly weren't a great offense last year, right? They were 11th in scoring. Isn't that shocking?
We have no idea who was good on offense last year. None.
They were like
what I've learned in this exercise.
Right. Well, you just have to figure out how to quantify it. I think if you score a lot of points per game, that's pretty good. And Cleveland was 10th.
Right. Oh, right. They were tied for
10 offensive points scored per game, 22.1.
I mean, I want to look at the Saints schedule and see when these points. I don't get it.
Carolina twice.
They scored 4. You see, anything that happens in week 18, we just, like I told you yesterday, Breece Hall had 34 carries in week 18.
So you want to kick out week 18 and see where they go?
They scored 48 points in week 18. So nobody remembers that. Oh, no, everybody remembers that. That was the game where Jameis tried to, what did he try to do at the end? It was like super controversial.
They wanted him to take a knee and instead he handed off to Jamal Williams.
Right.
Oh, yeah, dude. Listen to, if you take out week 18, the Saints averaged 20.8 offensive points per game.
Which would have made them, what, like 15th?
Well, it's tied for 15th for everybody if you take out week 18.
Oh, man, that's so funny. They had a huge boost by scoring 48 points in week 18.
They cheesed it.
Let's read some emails here at Fantasy Football. I'm sorry, anything else you want to add about volume, guys? Or
no.
All right. Fantasyfootball@cbsi.com is our email address. Fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. That is the letter I. This one comes from William in Memphis. Why are we giving Drake London an enormous Kirk Cousins bump up to the second round, but Kyle Pitts little to no bump?
I think it's because I think London will get more targets, and I think he'll make more plays.
I think maybe it's a we thing and not the entire industry thing. Because, like, I look at some ADP and Kyle Pitts is being drafted ahead of George Kittle.
Kyle Pitts is definitely getting a bump. I mean, based on what he's been, he's definitely getting a bump.
They're both getting a bump. I do think that, and I've talked about this, I think the London bump is too big. I'm not giving London the same bump.
Are we having like a bump drinking contest here? This is very funny.
I don't even know what that means. I think
how much you're boosting their ranking versus what they've actually produced in the NFL.
I think what they've actually produced in the NFL means something, but I don't know if it necessarily. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think it's fair to say Drake London
really hasn't produced a lot in the NFL. Like, you got
his best season is worse than Pitt's, right?
Yes. No.
I don't know. Yeah,
in
well,
terms of
Pitt's
points
had
per
1,000 yards, and Pitts has. So in that measure, but Pitts had that without London. I look at there's not a lot of Pitts was healthy and London was healthy, but when London was a rookie and Pitts was in his second year, there was a stretch where they were both healthy. London had slightly better numbers than Pitts as a rookie. So I mean, look, Pitts is getting a bump, but when you just talk about general excitement and breakouts and stuff like that, it's definitely London getting a lot more of that kind of buzz.
And how much better does Drake London have to be in terms of production? Because you said he was slightly better. Let's say it's 1-2 points per. How much better does he have to be in terms of production to be more valuable in fantasy with the positional difference? Like a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're talking about maybe 3 points per game better.
That was my argument last year. Chris Towers and I were saying that. It's like, if you want part of the Falcons offense, why take Drake London when you can wait a few rounds and get Kyle Pitts? Because London was going ahead of Pitts last year also. They both ended up being busts, I would have to say.
I'll give you the question that I've had to ask myself when doing my wide receiver rankings. Who do you put ahead of London with confidence?
Yeah.
Is it DeVonta Adams, who is probably safe for 15 points per game, but I don't like his quarterback situation? Is it one of the Niners receivers? I've already made the move with Olave, and he's got a worse quarterback. But it's a fair point to bring up with London.
Yeah, I think with confidence, there's probably only 12-ish guys. And then I've got another 15 to 20 guys within 1 point per game of London. And you're just trying to sort that mess out. And if you want to choose, I hope that I'm wrong on London and too low, because he's on several of my dynasty rosters and I've basically gotten nothing out of him so far in his career.
Yeah.
I think he needs volume. I don't think he's got, I think both he and Pitts just don't have the explosiveness that guys that are at the top of their respective position groups have. But I think London's got a better shot to see more targets and maybe create more explosive plays just by virtue of his routes changing, the target quality changing. And I think that'll help him more. I think that'll benefit him more. And I think he'll get more of that than Pitts will.
I think also this is another one of those situations that I just have a hard time expressing a lot of confidence in. It's a new offensive coordinator.
A first-time offensive coordinator. It's a old quarterback coming off of an Achilles. And like Dave said, the way Kyle Pitts was used is not the way hardly any tight ends in the NFL are used. Pitt's role is going to be dramatically different. I would assume London's role is going to be different. I don't even know, are they pass heavy or run heavy? They can't have an interview without talking about how much Bijan Robinson's going to touch the ball. Right.
If they're run heavy, even a little bit run heavy, it's really, I'd rather just kind of be in the middle on both of those guys.
That Pitts doesn't have the explosiveness of the other guys at the position. I think he definitely does. Last year he was so hampered by his injury. He even said so. And yet he ranked third in explosive play rate among tight ends. I think I usually use 40 or more targets for the tight ends to get about 30 guys as a sample size. In his 3 seasons, he's ranked first, 11th, and third in explosive play rate. Explosive play rate is, I think it's 17 or more yards is what they use. 16 per target. Not necessarily per catch, but per target. So things like catch rate will factor in there as well. But he has the highest ADOT all the time. He's been first in ADOT, so that helps explosive play rate too. So
I wonder if the explosive play rate comes down with,
or at least getting the
ADOT going down.
Yeah, right. He's been first in ADOT all 3 seasons among tight ends with 40 or more targets. He's been first or second in percentage of times being lined up out wide. And he's been first, 11th, and third in explosive play rate. This is Kyle Pitts.
No, the answer is not to turn Kyle Pitts into Hunter Henry. But I think they would benefit from having Pitts run shorter routes.
And, all right. And we just have no idea what it's going to look like.
We don't have any idea, but you can think about having Darnell Mooney there as someone that's probably going to be tasked with running longer routes.
All right, guys, let's go to our next email. It is from Roy in Israel. I find myself drafting more and more zero receivers, picking usually 3 running backs in my first 3 rounds. And what do you guys think about that strategy?
I understand it completely as a proponent, as we talked about earlier this week, Dave, of no intentional positional strategy.
Simply put, yes.
We've moved into
simply or seriously, Heath?
Seriously.
Seriously, no intentional positional strategy. Snips.
Correct.
Snips.
Yes.
We're bringing that back.
Because like if you get into a draft that's being drafted based off current best ball ADP, I saw Kyren Williams in the 4th round the other day.
Yeah.
Like it's hard not to do that.
But he's saying start with 3 running backs.
Well, I'm saying if you can take Breece Hall in round 1 and Jonathan Taylor in round 2 and Kyren Williams in round 3, well, now you've got 3 top 6 running backs.
Okay. Do you think, are you seeing Jonathan Taylor go that late? Well, yeah. Are you seeing Breece Hall, Taylor? Wow. And the other part of that, why this year, like I wouldn't do it. I get jittery just having 2 running backs of my first 2 picks.
But if you're, let's say in round 3, like let's say Jonathan Taylor falls to you in round 2. So you started with Hall and Taylor because they were clearly the best players available.
I think Gibbs and Taylor might be the better example, but go on.
And you get to the 3rd round and you're choosing between Michael Pittman and Mike Evans and Kyren Williams.
It's not even close, Kyren Williams.
Right.
But okay, if I could get Kyren Williams there or even Travis Etienne there or something, sure. However, what I was going to say to further what you were talking about, Heath, this might be a year to try something like this because you've got so many wide receivers within 1-2 points of each other that there may not be a big difference between the wide receiver you're getting late in round 2 and the wide receiver you're getting in round 5. Would Christian Kirk outscoring Devontae Adams really shock people in PPR? Would George Pickens being a lot better than Drake London and going 3 rounds later really surprise people? You know, that I think also plays into this argument of waiting at wide receiver.
Yes. Yeah, I think you could make the Pickens over London argument very easily.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to our next email here. Dave, I'll give you this one. Pete from Seattle. We talk about the age where players start to see a decline. Specifically for running back, it starts around age 28, then more likely by 29. But what I don't hear is a carry range.
Oh, yeah.
Have you found any data to show where the drop-off is in terms of carries?
I used to study this every year, and the number wasn't really carries. I created a formula where it was carries plus catches, but the catches number was divided by 3 because a lot of the receptions that running backs have don't end in a car crash. They end with a running back going out of bounds or, easier path to ending the play without bruises when they catch the ball versus when they run the ball. The number I found was like around 1,800 to 2,000 total touches in that regard. I'll save you the math on the catches and all that. I think you start to get a little concerned when that number's at 1,500. But the caveat is the elite players at that position, the running backs who are great and have been great for a long time, can typically extend that number well past 2,000. So look for 1,500 carries. Let's call it 1,700 touches, depending on what type of running back we're talking about, because there's a difference between Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler, just to give you 2 older running backs. But that's when I would start to be aware of a possible breakdown.
And Paul, where's he from, Dave?
Minneapolis, Minnesota. Have you ever heard of it?
He's actually from Sydney, Australia.
Well, then why would you have me say the town if you know where he's from?
Because I usually look in the signature portion. It says like Paul from Sydney, Australia. This one, it just says Paul, but then it says long time listener from Sydney, Australia. So I always read like the end of the email, then go back to the beginning. So I apologize for that. He says, hi, Jordan, Mitch, Josh, Ben, and Dyson. And that not even Google knows this one. So I don't know who those people are. Anyway, he wants to know if anybody likes snake drafts better than auctions.
Anybody in the world?
Anyone on the show? Anyone in America?
No, I wouldn't say I like it better. No.
I mean, I love auctions and all that, but I don't want to do more than one or two.
They just take too long.
Yeah, they do. They stress me out. Really, I'm on tilt the entire time.
Not me. I love them. They're great. Everybody should do them.
He asked for our strategies, but we'll save that for another show because that's a long show. Question
We're gonna have an auction show, right?
Oh, for sure.
Definitely.
Did you guys watch? Have you watched any of? And did you start season 3 of The Bear?
No.
No and no.
Oh, I mean, it's such a great show, Dave. I mean, like I said, it's right up your alley. It's about a restaurant in Chicago. Sorry, that sounded like a mean joke, but we've had that conversation before.
I've been to many restaurants in Chicago.
Yeah, it's a great show. I gotta say, the first episode of season 3 was, to me, so bad and such a waste of time. I stopped watching Mayor of Kingstown so I could watch The Bear season 3, and I'm just so mad at myself for it. So
most of the restaurants I go to in Chicago are cash only, and they have like a counter, and that's it. Like you can't sit there.
This, I think, The Bear was that way. Anyway,
you stopped and you watched the first couple of episodes of Mayor of Kingstown.
No, I was watching the most recent one, episode 5, but then my wife was like, "Let's watch The Bear." She doesn't watch Mayor of Kingstown. I was like, "Okay," and I am so regretful of that decision because I hated that episode. I hated it. Oh my God, they were playing the same piano music over and over and over again for a half an hour. It drove me crazy. Oh, terrible episode. Got to get back on track, Bear. Got to get back on track.
I think this could be the best season of Mayor of Kingstown.
They're all great.
They're so good.
Yeah, it's such a great show.
I've started catching episodes of The 100. My wife has started watching that. My son too. Have either of you heard of that show?
Never heard of it.
It's a dystopian sci-fi future show where people are on a space station after a nuclear destruction of the Earth's population, and they start sending people down to Earth. First child convicts, and then others after, and there's all kinds of drama that ensues after.
I do have a question for the chat because I see Matt's very upset. Does Adam's take that season 3 episode 1 was terrible deserve to go in the Twitter thread?
I hated it. I wouldn't say it was terrible. I would say I hated it. It was very artsy fartsy, basically, and just a waste of time. Nothing happened in that episode, so it just wasn't for me. All right, yeah, you can put it in the thread. That's fine.
Okay,
it's a little too specific, I think, for the thread. Yeah, it's objectively beautiful. I don't watch the show for it to be objectively beautiful. I get it. He made beautiful dishes. It was a boring episode. All right, we'll talk to you. Oh, we'll talk to you in 20 minutes. Another episode. You'll hear it on Friday, but we'll talk about wide receivers very soon on Fantasy Football Today. See you later.